They say there's a hotel high in the Colorado Rockies where the air is crisp, the views are breathtaking, and the silence of the mountains settles in like a dream. But when night falls, the dream shifts into something else. Whispers drift down empty hallways, pianos play with no one seated at the keys, and children laugh in the dark when there are no children to be found. This isn't just a story to frighten you before bed. This is a real place, a grand old hotel with more than a century of history. It is called the Stanley Hotel, and it has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted places in America. The story of the Stanley begins not with ghosts, but with a man. Freelan Oscar Stanley was an inventor, a man of wealth and vision, best known for creating the Stanley steamer automobile. But despite his success, he faced a devastating diagnosis in the early 1900s, tuberculosis. At the time, there was little doctors could do. The disease was often fatal, and treatment was rudimentary at best. But doctors told him mountain air could help, and so with his wife Flora, Freelan traveled to Estes Park, Colorado. To his surprise, the mountain climate gave him strength, and he fell in love with the wild beauty of the Rockies. Freelan decided to build something extraordinary there. In 1909, the Stanley Hotel opened its doors, a gleaming white structure that looked almost out of place against the rugged wilderness. It was designed to be a luxury resort, bringing the glamour of the East Coast to the Mountain West. The hotel boasted electricity, telephones, a sewer system, and even automobiles for guest use. It was elegance in the heart of the wilderness. But from the beginning, something about the Stanley carried a certain weight, a feeling that time itself clung to its walls. Stories began to circulate, small at first, then impossible to ignore. After Flora Stanley's death, guests and employees claimed they could still hear piano music drifting through the ballroom at night. The sound was soft, graceful, as though Flora herself had sat down to play one of her favorite pieces. Sometimes witnesses swore they saw the piano keys moving, only to find no one there. On the fourth floor, where servants once lived, visitors began to hear the sound of children laughing, footsteps running down the hall, and doors creaking open and slamming shut. Yet there were no children registered in the rooms. Some guests even felt their bed covers tugged at or their hands touched by unseen playmates. Then there is the infamous Room 217. In 1911, a gas leak caused a massive explosion in that very room. A maid named Elizabeth Wilson was caught in the blast. She survived, but the scar of that event never left the hotel. Over the decades, countless guests in Room 217 have reported strange happenings. Some found their belongings unpacked and neatly arranged as though by unseen hands. Others noticed lights switching on and off by themselves. And many couples, particularly those unmarried, have claimed to feel an icy presence in the room as though disapproving of their company. It is said that Elizabeth Wilson never left her post, still tending to her room even in death. But perhaps the Stanleys' greatest claim to fame came in 1974, when author Stephen King and his wife arrived for a stay. It was the off-season, and the hotel was nearly deserted. The massive hall stretched out endlessly, empty and silent. The Kings were given Room 217. That night, Stephen King had a nightmare. He dreamed of his young son running down the long corridors of the hotel, chased by something terrible. He woke in a sweat, sat at the desk in the room, and began to imagine what kind of stories might play out in a place so eerie, so lonely, so vast. By the next morning, he had the beginnings of a novel that would become one of the most famous horror stories ever written, The Shining. Though the film adaptation was shot elsewhere, the Stanley Hotel became the real-life overlook, forever linked with King's masterpiece. And the hauntings continued. In the lobby and billiard room, guests and staff have reported seeing Freelan Stanley himself, dressed in formal wear, overseeing the hotel as though he never left. Flora, meanwhile, still plays her piano. On the fourth floor, ghostly children run through the halls. Room 401 carries its own dark tales. Men report feeling a crushing weight on their chests, while women have whispered of unseen hands brushing against them in the night. Room 418 is infamous for the sound of children laughing and playing when it stands empty. The concert hall has its ghost, too. A man named Paul, who once worked in maintenance, has sent a go-keeper there long after death. Guests on tours have heard a booming voice command, "Get out," when lingering too late at night. Others have felt sudden blasts of cold air or seen flashes of movement out of the corner of their eyes. Over the years, photographs have captured orbs, shadowy figures, and strange faces. Paranormal investigators have filled the halls with cameras, recorders, and sensors, only to walk away convinced the Stanley is alive with something beyond explanation. Skeptics argue it is all drafts, creaky floors, or overactive imaginations, but those who have walked its halls at night will tell you differently. They will tell you that the silence there is not empty. It is filled with presence. The Stanley Hotel has embraced its haunted reputation, offering ghost tours and overnight investigations for the curious and the brave. Tour guides recount the legends, guests hope for an encounter, and many walk away with stories of their own, a whisper in their ear, a cut on their sleeve, a laugh echoing down a hallway when no one is there. What makes the Stanley so powerful is that it is not just a building. It is a blend of history, tragedy, and imagination. It is the love story of a man who found life again in the mountains. It is the story of a tragic accident in room 217. It is the story of a writer who dreamed a nightmare that would terrify the world. And it is the story of countless visitors who came expecting luxury, but left with chills that lingered long after. So if you ever find yourself in Estes Park, Colorado, you might look up at the Grand White Hotel, its many windows gleaming against the mountains. You might walk its halls, hear the faint echo of piano keys, or catch a glimpse of movement in an empty room. And if you're lucky, or unlucky, you might just experience for yourself why the Stanley Hotel is known as one of the most haunted places in America.